peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Viewers, good morning. This morning I want to address the issue of Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. The legacy of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya keeps on moving, keeps on going forward and forward. Since the handshake in 2018 that brought about the peace, the tranquility, the unity of purpose, President Uhuru's star has been rising. All over Africa, people are thinking of using the model that Kenya used to stop any form of violence, chaos on the streets after elections. As you know, all of you are aware that elections in Africa produce two things: after or before or after the voting. Disputed elections, winner takes it all, loser doesn't accept the results. But the Kenyan model takes us miles and miles away from the normal type of democracy. The democracy, a negotiated format, a consensus format. A democracy that gives consensus a chance. A democracy that talks about the future of a country, the unity of a country, as opposed to a fragmented country, polarized country, where most African countries find themselves in. We have seen in the last 10 years or so, most of the elections in Africa have been contested by opposition. Very few people in Africa, countries in Africa, where opposition has conceded defeat and come up to congratulate the winner. We have seen the South African model has worked very well. The Ghanaian model has worked so well. I don't see any other country in Africa where the models have worked well. I thought it would be Sierra Leone, but today we see Sierra Leone going back to the same ethnic tensions, as you can see from the reports that are circulating in the international media and the local media. So elections in Africa are contentious issues. They create a contentious position, create a departing point for the people of Africa, of that particular nation. The legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta, therefore, will be remembered for having brought the tranquility that we have today, the peace, the new format, the new tool of having a better organized civil Africa, an Africa without violence, an Africa without chaos after elections, when the opposition accepts to work for the interests of a nation, not personal interests. This has worked in Kenya, and thank you very much, Your Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, for the tenacity and the steadfastness that you have guided this handshake up to today. For those who want to mutilate the handshake belittle the handshake. One lesson they should learn is to look at Libya. Libya was once a territory we all respected. It is no more. Let's keep the handshake and the legacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Thank you.
We were way ahead of them in our civilization. They set out to destroy us. And Berlin Conference put the nail on that coffin. So they gave Djibouti the same sovereignty as the United States. They gave Burundi the same sovereignty as China. They gave Togo. You see, the EU realizes individual little countries, they can't survive on the world stage. So they come together as the European Union. Now picture this now. So they cut up this Africa into the tiny little countries, small economies that could never survive on their own, but gave them the same sovereignty as the big boys. So that way, when the little bitty countries go to the world stage for the purposes of development and discussing trade, they're wannabe boxers who are being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring every day. How do you put China in the same boxing ring with Eswatini? Eswatini has 1.2 million people. China has 1.4 billion people. And you put them on the same stage and say, go at it, negotiate. Are you with me?
Yes.
This is insanity of the highest order. How have we allowed this carnage to go on? When Eswatini is thrown in the same boxing ring with China and Eswatini collapses before Eswatini even gets on the stage, the world says, well, Eswatini, what's wrong with you? Why can't you take care of your people? Well, China came in and said, Eswatini, give me all your gold or else. And if Eswatini does not agree, they just go on next door to Lesotho and give Lesotho an extra $1. And if Lesotho doesn't take it, they just jump on to Togo, Central African Republic. It was all by design. 1884. They did something else in addition to chopping us up. They also set out to make the African believe that everything African was bad and undesirable, and everything Western, particularly French and British, was more desirable. We call that the legacy of colonization. Prior to that, they had started long working on the slaves. Make them think everything about them, forget anything about Africa. Where you come from is a horrible place, diseased and dying people, constantly at war with themselves, uncivilized. Cut out any communications with them. You need to just know what we tell you. And we call that the legacy of slavery. So that's where you look at where we are today. 135 years later, a system that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated, that Africa is forever exploited, remains in place today, alive and well. And we sit here and we ask ourselves, why isn't Africa moving forward? Why does Africa continue to be taken advantage of? Well, I'll tell you why, very simply. Until Africa comes together as a continent speaking with one voice, one continent, one people, nothing, and I repeat, nothing is gonna change. As individual little African countries, we are wannabe boxers. We will never make it fighting against the heavyweights. We must speak with one voice. Yes. And this is exactly exactly what our Pan-African leaders wanted to see happen in 1963 when they came together in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. They clearly stated that Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and that African Union was now. They said Africa must speak with one voice. It is the only way for Africa to take its rightful place on the world stage. Sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa in 1963, they were divided. We had two factions, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group were saying Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and African Union now. This was Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Only 7. The other 25 of the 32 who attended were the Monrovia group. They were the nationalists. They said, let's go slow. Let's kind of wait on this Pan-African thing. 55 years later, 56 this year, we're still going slow. As if it wasn't bad enough that we were divided up into the tiny little countries that we are today. The gift that Berlin Conference gave us. One other thing that France did between 1958 and 1961 in the name of giving us our independence as African countries. France forced the Francophone, and I hate that terminology. There is no such thing as Francophone, Anglophone. They made it up. But for the purposes of communication, I will use that. 14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document. You thought they could have found a better name for the document. The document was called the Pact for the Continuation. I repeat, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We are talking about giving you independence, but sign this pact for the continuation of colonization in a different format. And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be independent. Hello. Maybe we need to redefine the meaning of independence for the French. First, France said, you see, you monkeys, you don't know how to manage your money. We're going to demand that you deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the French Minister of Finance. Under the French Central Bank, under the control of the French Minister of Finance. France is then going to take your 85% bank deposits from each and every one of you. Deposit those funds in the French stock market under the French name. And you may or may not know the returns. Today, as we speak, the latest figures are saying for every 14 billion that France invests in the stock market from Africa, they are realizing upwards of 300 billion in return. Every year, year in, year out, because of these deposits from the African countries, France is taking out of Africa over $500 billion. Now figure it out. For every 14 billion, the returns on the investment are over 300 billion, and they are taking over 500 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in and year out from us poor people, Africans. Back to the pact. So should you want to access some of your money that you have deposited with France, you have to submit your country's financial returns. And if approved, you get to get it as a loan. You can only access up to 20% of your money year in, year out as a loan at commercial interest rates. Your own money. As if that was not enough. They said all your minerals discovered, yet to be discovered, all your oil discovered, yet to be discovered. France and French companies have the first right of refusal. If there's anything left over that the French companies do not want, your people might have. to this day. They said you will only use the currency that we created for you because you're special Africans. We call it the CFA. There was the Central African CFA and the Western African CFA, same animal. And that France is the only one that can print it for you. 1958, fast forward, they're still printing it for us. And if you start misbehaving, they just stop printing your money, and your country's in trouble. They also said your language of instruction shall be French, whether you like it or not. That France will have military presence in your country, that your military can only be trained by France, that you can only buy military equipment from France, that you cannot have any military alliance with your neighbor, and that in the event of war, your allegiance is only to France. And furthermore, because they have military presence in your country, they can invade you without notice should they feel that the interests of France in your country are being violated.
Teach, sister, teach. Speak on, sister.
Fast forward, 2019, nothing has changed. The same people who have the audacity to tell us that we are poor countries, they are taking trillions out of Africa every year. And what is the African doing? Like an obedient, programmed black man, we just give in. We know the facts, but we just do nothing about it. Now, you have to say some of the fears are real, because the France that has sold you inferior equipment to theirs, France that has trained your military to be inferior to their military, they are now in your country. They can invade you. They have the permission to do so. They can destabilize you. And then one might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brothers and sisters.
Very good morning to you, and thank you so much for watching us. Of course, today is the 31st of January, and if you know what's happening somewhere in Europe, is that today is the Brexit day. It was a long 3-year road, but right now, today marks the end of Britain being in the European Union. They part ways today. That marriage is over, and now UK will be free to make other alliances within the EU and to reach out and just trade or other things, just agree with individual countries, unlike when they were together in the European Union. Of course, right now it is too early, but over time perhaps we'll see the repercussions that comes with Britain leaving the EU. So today is the last day, is the Brexit day today. And also, just speaking earlier on, that was Ambassador Arikana, who was the AU ambassador to the United States, and remember she was fired last year in October because of her very what they considered extremist, criticism of the West and how they continue to impoverish African states by their neo-imperialism that really is very strong right now in Africa. So she was, some of these deals that France entered with their former colonies are saying, no, you cannot. And the way they want African countries to trade in the world market, really, the conditions there are not very, conducive for Africa. So whatever that is out there really makes sure that Africa continues to be very dependent on the other countries, especially in the Western countries. So Madam Arikana, or Ambassador Arikana, was very critical of this, and she was very brave, courageous, talked about this and called France out, called the United States out. She was bold, and so they did not like her. And and so she got fired last year in October. There was a petition going around to make sure that she's reinstated, but I'm not sure how that worked out. And Richard Mayaka there, you're saying this lady has spoken like more than 50 African leaders. And what I'll tell you that, Mr. Bayaka, is that our 50 African leaders will never even speak like that. They will never stand up to these Western powers. And the only few people have been able to do that. And one of them is the late Robert Mugabe, who did not, when he stood and spoke about Africa truly being independent, he really criticized the manner and the double standards in which the West uses when they engage with us Africans. So thank you so much. My name is Miriam Agutu. The show is Good Morning Africa, and the station is Punchline Africa TV, coming to you all the way from Kenya's capital. And Africa is our business, so we are going to talk about it. But before we do that, first of all, we have to go through what is making headlines across the daily newspapers here in Kenya, and then we shall just jump right into what's making headlines across other states in Africa. And we started the countdown, and today is around 22 days to go towards this peace signing of South Sudan. Will it hold? What is the latest? We have also the latest from Zimbabwe, as well as, right now the government seems to have agreed with the civil servants on how they're going to increase their salary. The civil servants there have been on a perennial protest and absconding of work because of a poor payment, as well as the Nile River dispute between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. What is the latest? I'll let you know. And Mozambique, Al-Shabaab seems to be taking a stronghold in that country. What is happening? And Guinea, Mr. Alpha Conde insists, if I want to change the constitution so that I can run for the third term, I will do that. And he was talking about this when, he was having an interview with a certain TV station. So we shall look at that as well. The latest there from Nigeria, from Guinea, and also in Nigeria, lawmakers now coming out and they're castigating, the security officials. Then they're saying, if you cannot perform, then leave, quit, because the insecurity in Nigeria has really increased. And I'm just shocked that it is just now that they want to take action, while I don't live in Nigeria, but reports we've been receiving from that country, the insecurity has been rampant. So just now that the lawmakers are waking up and are calling for action, I hope it's not too late. And also, what else? Some news from Sudan. We have some information from Ambazonia, and also we have some information from Biafra, where Nnamdi Kanu was being accused of having collected bribe from the federal government, and he's come out and said, no way, there's no way that can happen, especially now that my parents have died, and the cause of my parents' death was after the shocking arrest and escape that Nnamdi Kanu did in 2017 after they wanted to arrest him. So the events that led to him running away from Nigeria, he says, really shocked his parents, and they've never recovered. So they're yet to be buried. They'll be buried on the 14th of February, so just a few days away. So we have so much to talk about. But first, let's look at what is happening in Africa this morning. Emmanuel Malual, you're saying she is a true daughter of Africa, Mama Africa. Yes, indeed, and I'm very proud of her. And I don't know where that petition went. I don't know how far it was able and how many signatures it was able to garner to just make AU rethink. But AU is a gatekeeper to other powers. Really, they don't serve our interest, and we've seen that time and time again. And so you understand why she might have been a thorn in their flesh there, because she was not dancing to the master's tune. That is Ambassador Arikana there. So let's look at the Star newspaper this morning. I know the front pages. There's a famous betting firm here called SportsPesa. Actually, it even sponsors a team in Britain there, I think. And so why state refused to renew the license of this betting firm? MPs now propose radical tax and names and where they're representing. So if you want to just get these details, go to page 5 of the Daily Nation. And also The woman who failed Babayao. Now it is sweet justice for Mrs. Cecilia Mbugua, the widow whose land was grabbed and given to Waititu's woman. So this is just one of the contentious matters that senators were raising during the trial of Kiambu Governor, former Kiambu Governor, now Ferdinand Waititu. Apparently, he went and took a piece of land from a widow and gave it to his second wife, and no payments were made. He just, abuse of power generally. So that really is what it is. It is the point that was being repeated over and over and over by senators who voted to remove him from power. And if indeed that was the case, then that is really, really an absolute abuse of power. And still on the front pages here on the Standard newspaper. All right, so let's just take a short break, and when we come back, we shall continue, and then later on we look at what's making headlines across Africa. Thank you so much. Good morning, Africa. Shall be right back.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Viewers, good morning. This morning, I want to address the issue of Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. The legacy of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya.
Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
and so you were not able to, get us from the initial link that we had. But thank you so much for joining. And just before we had that technicality, we were looking at what is making headlines, and in the Kenyan newspapers this morning, and we had looked at the Daily Nation and as well as the Star newspaper. So we're just in the process of looking at the Standard newspaper here, and of course on the front pages of the Standard newspaper, dirty tricks in YT to ouster, and behind the scenes, the scramble for magical 24 votes needed to send Babayao home sparks accusations of engineered walkouts and cash for votes inducements as maneuvers in Senate proceedings. So that story is on page 8, 9, and 10 of the Standard newspaper this morning. I remember, Kiambu Governor Mr. Ferdinand Waititu yesterday, was removed. No, not yesterday, but on today's Friday. On Wednesday, he was impeached by the Senate, and of course, he's gone to court to try to appeal that impeachment. And then yesterday, the deputy governor was supposed to be sworn in, Mr. James Nyoro, as the new Kiambu boss, but apparently they did not follow the due law that is expected for him to be sworn in, and so that would have created another legal problem there for him. And so there had to be a notice that was supposed to be made gazetted before he was sworn in today. So apparently that event is supposed to be happening today, or rather is happening as we speak there. So very interesting stories there. So I see still on the front pages of the Standard newspaper, coronavirus, how Kenyan left the epicenter of the outbreak, and that is a story on page 6. I think a Kenyan who was also caught up in this coronavirus outbreak there in China tells his story. And on the page 3 of the Standard newspaper, DPP finds a bond bid by man held for killing a family. So a lot is happening there, and thank you so much. So as you know, President Uhuru Kenyatta and NASA leader Raila Odinga are meant to be going to, the United States during the national prayer meeting there, and on the sidelines they'll be giving a speech on this handshake that they had on March of 2018 that really saw the political trajectory of this country just take a completely different turn. Personally, I was shocked because then I was working for another radio station just here as a newscaster, and we were just preparing for the 1 p.m. news, and then we were called. There's a press conference on the front, steps of Harambee House, and that is the official office of the president. And then who do we see emerging from the president's office was Raila Odinga. And so the country was shocked. And because why the country was shocked? Because we had come in from a very grueling, electioneering period where there was accusations and counter accusations, where President Uhuru Kenyatta's first win was challenged in court by Raila together with his NASA coalition partners. And the first challenge, the Supreme Court of Kenya said indeed President Uhuru, there were enough irregularities to warrant, the cancellation of President Uhuru Kenyatta as the president. And so we had to go for another election in October. The first one we had in August and then in October. So after that, it was just chaos. And then the second election, the opposition boycotted and, they refused. So the strongholds, especially of Mr. Raila Odinga, they refused to vote. They said no. And even just across other parts of the country, there was voter apathy. They said they will not participate in a system they did not really have confidence in. And so it was a lot happening in this country. And before you know it, they were asking for the country to be split into two. So it was very chaotic. And Kenya was going towards a very dangerous rabbit hole. And I don't know if it would have continued like that, if we would have been able to get ourselves out of it. And so this handshake, you understand why it was very shocking and very unexpected, but it happened. And since it happened, politics in this country has not been the same again. When you look at the headlines time and time again, in fact, another one last week that said Raila Odinga was the fierce critique of President Uhuru Kenyatta, but now has become his fierce defender in Parliament and outside, not in Parliament, but his people will defend President Uhuru Kenyatta's, in Parliament. And also, Raila Odinga has been very vocal in coming out. And of course, that handshake necessitated or really led to what we call now the BBI report, that now, these rallies have really been to be honest, have really been turned into some political rally. And, and we saw the other part of DP's team who have been left out of this process because they've been saying, it is not a legal process. They do not support the manner in which this thing was made. They did not even support that handshake. Raila Odinga is trying to join the government from the back side. And so they've been very apprehensive about the whole thing. And so, a couple of days ago, they said, oh, no, wait, we don't want to be left out of this, BBI bandwagon. So they said, we shall be coming to these meetings. And true to their word, they attended the meeting that happened in Mombasa last week on Saturday. And, we saw Murkomen there. And it was okay. I like that he was not really booed or there was no violence or he was not really attacked. So that shown some level of maturity. But also what bothered me, it became like a Baba thing, everything was just Baba. And so for people who just want to be there for the BBI purposes and not being concerned with other politics, really, that must have made them very, very uncomfortable because it appeared to be, everything was just centered around Raila Odinga. And, well, rightfully so, I think for his supporters who think he is, the founder of this BBI, him and President Uhuru Kenyatta. And so, but still, I think it's a process that is bigger than Mr. Raila Odinga. It's a process that is bigger than the politics of the day, if at all. This BBI is to solve some of these problems and the illness that has plagued this country over every 5 years electioneering period. Then we have to look at it outside of the politics of the day and see really, truly, how can we find solutions to this madness? How can we make sure that Kenyans don't get incited every 5 years? How can we make sure that Kenyans feel safe to vote and to stay where they are, despite of what time it is, whether we're voting or not? But I can feel safe moving into another part of the country and just, even buying land and starting my business and not worrying about my business will be looted, it will be burnt down, or I will be evicted. So these are things that we have been grappling with since early 1992. And they've become rampant over time. So I'm just hoping that this BBI process, they should just take out the politics from it, because I know it's a political process, so it's very difficult sometimes to separate it from politics, but it's not doing us any good. It is not doing the country any good. And for just a normal Kenyan who does not care about the politics of the day and wants to understand, what is this thing they keep calling BBI? How is it going to change my life? When they come in and they bring all this politics in it, we lose it, we lose the interest, Kenyans lose, because sometimes personally, the politics in this country sometimes can be very tiresome. If somebody's not calling the other person a name, and sometimes they don't even, argue on the basis of ideologies or things that really matters to Kenya. So it can be very tiresome and tedious. So I tend to sometimes just stay away from it. But this BBI, since when it goes to the referendum, as now it appears to be inevitable, then as a Kenyan, I need to know, what am I going there to vote for? I need to know if there's something that I need changed. Has it been included, and how has it been captured? So it should be made a Mwananchi process that has been owned by people. But we've seen the politicians capture it and turn it into something else, and like a roadmap to 2022. And that has made a section of Kenyans very, okay, I don't want to be concerned about this, but if you are going to vote for it, then Wananchi needs to be given an opportunity to know what's really this BBI is all about, to give their opinion, to air their opinion, and make sure that when this leader steps to those podium and give all these points they're giving that they want included in the BBI, it should be what the people want, not what the politicians want, because the politicians will always do things that are on their own interest, and really they don't consult with the people of Kenya. So it is important that they start consulting with the people of Kenya so that we are involved. If they keep saying this is our process, then they should let us own it and get the party politics out of it. ODM, NASA, please Get the politics out of BBI. Jubilee, get the politics out of BBI. Kenyans, we don't care. And if this document is to be brought to us, which will be brought to us, what we need to know is to be told what is really in the BBI, for our opinion and our to be reflected in the BBI, not what you want, Mr. Politician, or and these politicians who have hijacked this process and made it a whole political shebang that we really don't care about. So when I know the activities will be intensified because the other team that is allied to the DP, after attending that meeting in Mombasa that became just a Baba charade, I think they call it, they said, no, what we're going to do now, we're going to form our own team to be going around the country and to start, talking about this BBI our own way and our own style. And the other team said, now, hold on now. You cannot hijack this BBI process because, first of all, if you want, you go have your own handshake and then make your own BBI report and then go around the country to sensitize it. So we see it's just a back and forth, and it has become very politicized. And at the end, Kenyans get to lose. And if you go voting for that report, we will be voting on something that we have no input at all whatsoever. And I don't think that will be fair for the Kenyans. So I think our politicians, please get the politics out of it. We don't care. We just want to know the fact. Tell us what is in that report. Tell us how it's going to change our lives. Tell us why we should care and why it's even important, because a lot of Kenyans have not been convinced yet. So we need to know. That should be the job of these meetings that you intend to have across the country. Can you convince Kenyans why this BBI is important? And if so, how is it going to make their lives different? This inclusivity, what was lacking and what is now has been included that will make us all feel together, and the developmental agenda. And of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has spearheaded this, and right now we see him becoming more active, even on the ground with the meeting that he had a couple of days ago in Nakuru. He wants to be remembered as the president who was able to unite Kenyans. Mr. President, you have to change the strategy. You have to make it in a way, because now, as I've read there on the Star newspaper, where Mwangi Kinjuri is criticizing this process, and he's saying that President Uhuru Kenyatta is not very honest when it comes to his calls for a united Kenya, because he's saying you cannot sacrifice like your older friends and your older colleagues and a coalition because you're reaching out to new people and they're feeling they've been left out. And we've seen those calls coming from especially the Mount Kenya region saying President Uhuru Kenyatta, wanting to reach out to the rest of the country has neglected. And I think they've tried to have several meetings times and times again to resolve this matter. But it appears, perhaps there are other things that, undertones, that is not just what they're complaining about. But of course, politics of 2022 have come into play. So President Uhuru Kenyatta, if you truly want to be remembered as the president who's able to bring Kenyans together, so you must look at a strategy and a way that will make sure that majority of the Kenyans, I know you cannot please everybody, it's impossible, but at least the majority of Kenyans feel they've been included, and no part of the country, whether western, whether it's Mount Kenya, whether the coastal part, whether the northeastern, eastern, no part of the country, or Rift Valley for that matter, should feel they've been left out, because this is very important and we should all feel as if we have a say in this matter, because at the end of the day, it gets back to us and we get to decide whether we want it or not. So we should all feel included, and whatever you do, I don't know how you're going to achieve it, whether through BBI or otherwise, inclusivity is something that has been a problem in this country. And we saw, especially during the reign of President Kenyatta, our first president, our founding father, President Kenyatta, and then followed by President Moi, who retired. We retired him. He served this country for 24 years, and we said, you know what, enough is enough. And yes, I was one of the people who voted to remove him, because we needed a change. And NARC government, who came after him, really sort of carried the aspirations of Kenyans, and then later on, politics took over and they really failed us. But there are things that President Mwai Kibaki did that really changed this country. The investment in infrastructural, infrastructure in this country that was really dilapidated. There are places in this country that had never seen a proper road. So we saw a lot of things happen, and then President Uhuru Kenyatta came, and we saw him trying to, especially the last mile electrification of all the rural areas in Kenya. It is not 100%, but I tell you, that has really changed lives of people, in the rural areas. There are places where you never thought electricity will ever get, but through the last mile, we've seen, villages being lit up and hospitals being built because it has attracted some other businesses also, and schools being lit. And you see now an increase in boarding schools because now they have power and they can study late and they can enjoy that. So that has really worked very well. And so those parts of the country that are feeling very neglected, they could not enjoy some of these services they were able to receive. So, Mr. President, just keep spreading some of these things over there, and also just find a way, a strategy in which you can bring Kenyans together. This BBI report, a lot of people, the political class, have been saying it is a process, fine, that is meant to be inclusive to all Kenyans, but instead it is working to divide Kenyans even further. And I don't know if you see the truth in that, but perhaps you can sit down and re-strategize and see this thing that is meant to bring Kenyans together, but is really making the country fall apart. What else? How can we go about it to achieve the same goal, but perhaps find other ways that will not be seen as, getting rid of one part of, of the divide or targeting other people unfairly. So just a way that you can achieve the same thing, but in a better way that other people don't feel as if they've been left out. So President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga are set to visit the US, as I said earlier, and we've been saying it next month to speak about this handshake and how it is working and how it was able to bring, at least to quell some peace. There's some semblance of calmness in the country that was not there a couple of years ago. And so in some part of the countries, but some other countries are like, no. Some other parts, they're like, we don't want this thing because, you know what, it's messing up with our political, our strategy and our political maths. It's not really, it has messed up the whole arithmetic. So we don't want this BBI. And so a lot of politics have come into play. So anyway, it is something that we shall continue talking about because it is what is on the front pages of all our newspapers every morning. So there you have it. And Ukwa Isaac, you're saying we are more divided than before. Yes, indeed, and I agree with you. That is something that those are concerns that have been raised over and over. George Noki saying Nigeria recruited Boko Haram members in the forces, army, police, navy, etc. And now they're compromising the situation, slaughtering innocent Christian citizens, have you, Mr. George Noke, thank you so much, Shadrach Ugu, and the rest of you who are watching from Biafra and other parts of Africa. Emmanuel Malual, thank you for coming back. We had a problem with the first link that we had started this conversation, and then we had a technical hitch, so we had to start another one. So thank you so much. I see you're back here. You're saying President Uhuru has a good legacy, despite some politicians who are not happy when coming to handshake between him and veteran politician Raila Odinga. He's a veteran perennial opposition leader, and I don't know if he still has ambitions of becoming the president of this country. He's really been playing the cards very close to his chest, and he said, his meeting and the handshake between him and the president has nothing to do with 2022, which is when we shall be having our next elections to elect another president, because President Uhuru Kenyatta is serving his final term, and it will until 2022. And they've been saying, and they've been very, they've been speaking in one voice when it comes to that. That is President Kenyatta and Mr. Raila Odinga. They've been saying their handshake, their coming together, had nothing to do with politics. It was just for the greater good of the country. I don't know on one hand, I agree. And then on the other hand, if you have followed and studied the politics of this country and you know who Mr. Raila Odinga is, then you will understand why the likes of our Deputy President William Ruto and, you know, his supporters and others are very afraid of this union that he has with President Uhuru Kenyatta. He's called like the professor of politics in this country, and his calculations, he's very calculative. He's very strategic. So, of course, they say it has nothing to do with politics, but that is yet to be seen. But for now, the unity of the government and the working together and the cohesion of this country, they say, is the most important thing to them. And for sure, they've been walking that talk. But this BBI, you know, has really divided parts of this country. And their people, of course, the politicians, are the cheerleaders of this. And they're saying, you know, no. And that is because, you know, it's politics for them. It's not serving their interests. It's not serving what they want. And so, you know, they feel it's not good, but it has so much to do with politics. Chinedu Anthony, thank you so much. You're watching from China. Are you safe? Because I was watching the news this morning, just a couple of minutes before I came here, and you can't go to shop, you can't go to the stores to get anything. Well, it's good now, you can watch us, but are you okay? Are you safe? Are you able to travel? Which part of China are you at? I hope that you're very safe wherever you are. And Emmanuel Maluel, you're saying BBI is a very important document that can solve all ethnic tensions after 5 years of election in Kenya. And indeed, and I was personally disappointed when this BBI report was launched, because election has been the core of this mayhem, the core of this madness. Our electoral process, the way it is today, you know, and the way it has been, Kenyans, it's a winner takes it all. And the people who lose, you know, they become very sour losers. And there has been, allegations of irregularities and vote stealing and all of that, and manipulation of the process. Even introducing the biometric did not help at all, because now you hear, numbers are being manipulated. So we have to find a solution. We must find a solution for us to have a stable Kenya, and for us to really not worry every 5 years. A solution must be found. That is inevitable. But I think the way of finding this solution is what our leaders and our political players have not really agreed on. And I don't think this should be left to them. I think this is something that Kenyans must have a say. Kenyans must have a say on what type of electoral process they want and how they want it, because right now it's just the politicians, sharing. And that's why I'm saying this BBI, they have hijacked it. The politicians have hijacked the whole process. So you get that. All their thoughts and ideas is what they're keeping in these meetings. We want our voices to be heard. And bottom line is, Kenyans know and understand our elections is a problem. So now then, how can we find a solution that is bipartisan, that everybody will feel, yes, this shall work? Minus the politics of it. Of course, it is a political process. Elections is part of it. That is normally the end goal, to be elected as a politician and to serve. But they don't really serve. They serve their interests, and you can tell by all these cases you see of corruption and money laundering that a lot of these leaders are facing in our courts, and others who should also go face these charges in court. So we must find a solution. There has to be a solution for this, but can we do it in a way that it's inclusive, that is bipartisan, that is for the good of the country? Now that is the bigger question, because now BBI is, some people don't want to hear about it. Chinedu, you're saying, yes, we are very safe. China is doing a great job here to control the coronavirus. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to hear that you're safe and, keep safe. Thank you so much for joining. Emmanuel Malual, you're saying politicians should differentiate BBI and politics of succession in Kenya. No, they cannot. They have refused to. Not that they cannot. They have refused to. They have insisted on BBI and succession together. So that has been the thing, especially the surrogates of the key players up there. They are foot soldiers here, are really the problem. So you understand why President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, while they were planning and later on coming out the handshake, they did not consult any of their lieutenants, because if they did, then the handshake would have happened. They have really, hardcore people down here, they're surrogates who do a very good job in making sure that, they spread whatever agenda they have. Gebe Omoto Chan, nice to see you this morning. Is it? No, it's a minute to top of the hour here. And you're saying Baba Raila Odinga, indeed veteran. You're calling him Baba. All right, without handshake between the two, Kenyan could go in a different directions. Yes, the very important point there you're raising. But it is the Baba thing that made me a bit uncomfortable. And I have a lot of respect for Mr. Raila Odinga and his contribution to this country that he has made, that I don't care who you are, you cannot deny his part and parcel of this country's history. For us to enjoy this space that we have today, for us to enjoy this freedom that I can sit here and criticize President Uhuru Kenyatta and talk about what and just have this freedom that I'm enjoying here today, it is because of people like Raila Odinga, who fought for this space, who fought for the freedom of association, freedom of expression, who fought for this, and also who make sure that multi-party was something that was alive and kicking in this country. But having said that, last meeting in Mombasa, it became a Baba affair. And I like when he stood, he really didn't get into that too much. But his supporters, oh my goodness, they just made it and they revere him, and that's okay. But come on now, they should know the place and time, because when they do that, it looks like it was a NASA rally or something like that. But anyway, that is what Raila Odinga is called. Anywhere he goes, even when he goes to Kiambu, they still call him Baba. He has earned it because of the contribution that he's made in this country. But still, can we separate BBI from politics and from Babaism? I don't know if you're able to do that, because Baba was part of the handshake that bore the BBS. So I don't know, it's confusing. But thank you so much. So enough of the Kenyan, news and President Uhuru Kenyatta their BBI report and handshake that he wants to unite Kenyans with, and he wants to be remembered as being the president who really was able to bring Kenyans together. And enough of the politics across the country. And so now let's just look at what other news is making headlines across Africa this morning, and we start with Kenya. Not politics, don't worry. And Kenya's national carrier has suspended all flights to and from China because of the coronavirus outbreak. The virus has caused more than 130 deaths across China and at least 16 other countries. 6 suspected cases has been reported across Africa, although patients tested negative for the virus. In Kenya, a student was quarantined on Tuesday at a hospital in the capital Nairobi after arriving from Wuhan, city of China, the epicenter of the outbreak. We move to Congo, and 3 African presidents, not to Libya, and 3 African presidents were in Brazzaville, capital of Republic of Congo, on Thursday when the 8th meeting of the African Union High-Level Committee on Libya was held. Host President Denis Sassou Nguesso was joined by his Djibouti counterpart Ismail Omar Guelleh and Mohamed Ould Ghazouani of Mauritania. The AU chief Moussa Faki Mohamed will also in attendance, along with other government representatives. The AU chief said the summit had resolved to convene an inter-Libyan reconciliation conference in consultation with Libyan parties, neighboring countries, and the United Nations. We go to Mozambique, where suspected Islamist militants have attacked an agriculture college in northern Mozambique. Reports from Cabo Delgado province say the insurgents torched homes and looted shops in Bibiza, where the college is based. The students were not on campus at the time, and there were no reports of any casualties there. However, correspondents say this is the first time an educational facility has been targeted by the insurgents, known locally as Al-Shabaab, which has no known relation to the Somali-based Islamist militant group of the same name. Since 2017, the Mozambican militant group has killed more than 300 people and burnt hundreds of properties. We go to Burundi, where 4 journalists in Burundi, Agnes Ndirimpunza, Christine Kamikaza, Terence Mpozenzi, and Ejid Harerimana have been sentenced to 2.5 years in jail each after a court found them guilty of threatening the security of the state. They were also fined 1 million Burundi francs, that amounts to about $530 each, and the journalists from the Iwachu newspaper and the driver were arrested in October while investigating fighting between government soldiers and a rebel group near the Congolese border. The driver was acquitted by the court, and the journalist's lawyer said they were surprised and will appeal against the Thursday's ruling. And we go to the latest report in regards to the Nile River dispute, and now talks to resolve a long-running dispute between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan on the fate of Africa's largest hydropower project are continuing in Washington, USA, a day after they were initially supposed to end. The negotiators are still deadlocked over the final details on how the $4 billion dam will operate. Technical details on the duration of the filling stages, the amount of water to be released downstream by Ethiopia, and the quantity of water that will be retained in the reservoir being built are some of the biggest sticking points. In addition, Egypt has demanded assurance over drought management once the dam becomes operational later this year. We go to Mali, where the Prime Minister of Mali has announced plans for a major military recruitment drive in order to address the growing threat from jihadist groups. Babu Sisi said the plan was to hire 10,000 new soldiers in the coming months, and the Malian military is thought to have around 20,000 troops. In recent months, dozens of soldiers have been killed by Islamist militants linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group. 20 members of the security forces have died over the weekend during an attack of an army camp. Violence continues to spread in Mali, despite the presence of around 20,000 United Nations troops and French soldiers. And then now we go to Nigeria, where Nigerian media reports that vast assets looted by former military ruler Sani Abacha are to be repatriated to the country from the United States and Jersey. Once recovered, the $321 million will be spent on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the second Niger Bridge, and Abuja-Kano Expressway. The Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, is quoted as saying by Nigerian private newspaper Vanguard. He added that a formal agreement for the return of the funds is to be signed next week. Now, almost $7.6 million in assets recovered from the former Nigerian Delta State Governor James Ibori are also part of the deal, says Mr. Malami, according to the Vanguard, as well as assets linked to former Minister Diazani Alison Madueke, businessman Kolawole Aluko. And businessman Kolawole Aluko, Abacha ruled Nigeria with an iron fist after seizing power in 1993 until his sudden death in June 1998 after an apparent heart attack. We go to Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwean government and civil servants have reached an agreement for the immediate increase of salaries. According to Cecil Alexander, head of the Public Employees Trade Union Confederation, the provisional agreement reached with the government provides for a salary adjustment based on the cost of living as per 1st of January 2020. The purchasing power of Zimbabwean civil servants has been seriously eroded by endemic hyperinflation, forcing them to take to the streets to vent their anger. We move to Guinea, where Guinean President Alpha Conde now says the West African country needs a constitution that meets the needs of today's world. In defense of his controversial proposed constitutional amendment expected to be debated by lawmakers, speaking as an inclusive interview with African News, the president also spoke about the timing of the amendment, saying it comes at a time his final mandate under the current constitution is running out. Of course, opposition voices say it is specifically to further his bid to seek for a third term. And we go back to Nigeria, and now lawmakers in Nigeria lower chamber of parliament have called on the top brass of the army to resign, failure to which the president should relieve them of their post. How about the president just resigns? If you cannot provide security for your own people, and a militant group is just running the country, But anyway, members of the House of Representatives on Wednesday agreed at their plenary sitting to make the demand after debating over rising insecurity across the country. Meanwhile, Buhari called a national security meeting yesterday to discuss the security situation in Africa's most populous nation. And we go to South Sudan. And South Sudan's President Salva Kiir on Thursday left for South Africa for a 3-day official visit following an invitation by President Cyril Ramaphosa, his office had said. Kiir's spokesperson, Ateni Awek Ateni, said the president was accompanied by 2 cabinet ministers and the managing director of state-owned oil firm Nilepet for the diplomatic and trade talks. Mr. Ateni said the delegation will have various side meetings while in South Africa. President Kiir will also brief President Ramaphosa on the remaining days left to the 100 deadline for the formation of a unity government, security matters, and the issue of the number of states and boundaries. The deadline for forming a government of national unity is on February 22nd. Did I just read there? They're going for trade talks. Mr. Kiir. That is not what we want to hear now. All right? Somebody tell Mr. President Salva Kiir, trade talks is not what people of South Sudan want to hear. You're trading with what? Right now. That is not what the people of South Sudan want to hear. We want to hear the progress in peace, the peace process. And before you go he's already left anyway, he left yesterday to South Africa. He should be coming out and telling us the progress that these peace talks and peace deals and, what is happening and what is the latest. We need to know what is really happening, all right? President Salva Kiir. All right, so we go to Sudan, where dozens of Sudanese protested Tuesday in Khartoum, alleging that their relatives have been recruited by United Arab Emirates FAM as security guards, but were dispatched to war zones in Libya and Yemen. What? All right, so men and women carrying banners that read, "Our sons are not for sale, bring back our sons," demonstrated outside Sudan's foreign ministry in central Khartoum. Several demonstrators, AFP, spoke to say that their relatives had been given United Arab Emirates visas by travel agencies following advertisements in local newspapers for Sudanese men to work as security guards for UAE FAM called Black Shield, but they ended up being the ones who are now fighting the war in Yemen. That is so not good. All right, and so we read some news from Amazonia, and the leader of the Now movement, Mr. Akere Muna, has paid a visit to Manto Bibixi and other Anglophone detained at the Kandegui Central Prison in connection to the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions there. Though nothing filtered from Akere Muna's meeting on Tuesday at Kandegui, sources within his camp say he discussed on ways of defending some of the detainees who are yet to be judged. The detainees also made proposals for Akere Muna to take to the African Forum, which holds in Nairobi, to discuss solutions to the crisis Cameroon's northwest and southwest regions. You know what? I'll see whether we can find a way of attending this meeting in Nairobi that will be happening here, and also if we can interview some of the key participants to this meeting that will be happening. So this person went to to jail there to talk to some Amazonians and just get their opinion. So they sent him to go with a certain message and present in this meeting that will be happening here in Nairobi. All right, we will talk about that. So we talk about Biafra now, and the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, has denied striking a deal with President Muhammadu Buhari led federal government. Kanu said he will never collect a bribe from the federal government, especially now that his parents are dead. The IPOB leader was accused of striking a deal and collecting money from the federal government ahead of the burial of his parents. Kanu's parents are late HRH Eze Israel Oko and his wife, late Ogoze Sali Mene Okwo Kanu, will be buried on February 14th, 2020. Now, the IPOB leader had in 2017, of course, left Nigeria following soldiers' invasion of his home in Afara Okwa, Umuahia, Abia State. So And on a very lighter note, Kenyans are the second most fluent English speakers in Africa. This is according to a ranking by Global Private Language Tutor Education First, a ranking which primes the country to attract foreign investment. The English Proficiency Index by the Switzerland-based company ranks Kenya behind South Africa, even though Nairobi still emerged as the highest placed Africa city globally. Kenya was placed at position 18, while South Africa came in 6th, followed by Nigeria at number 29 and Ethiopia at 63. The Netherlands is ranked top in competency level. English, considered the global lingua franca of business, has been adopted in the world as bridging language to lower transaction costs across the borders. That was just on a very, very light note, all right? Because there are important things in the world other than just being proficient in English. So let's talk about some of these things. And the news there we just ended with about Biafra. Let me see. Ogebia Moti saying, I hope system in Kenya government this time should give Baba a chance for presidency. All right. Emmanuel Malual. You're saying history can repeat itself since liberation struggle in Kenya when late Kenyatta was jailed. Raila father refused to be chairperson of KANU and asked authorities to release Kenyatta. Yes, he did that. You think history will repeat itself? Yeah, but yeah, Mr. Jaramogi Odinga, who is Raila Odinga's father, he actually did that. Thank you so much. Brighto Eka, you're saying he runs for trade talks, the domains he used to enslave his people. God, why can these guys not keep their ego and sincerity? Sincerely hear the people's cry. I don't understand. I don't understand why trade talks will be something that Mr. Kir will think is very important right now. 22 more days to go to the peace deal. I want to hear what is the latest. I know Mr. Riek Machar was supposed to be traveling to South Sudan and, to try and just patch up and see if they could find a solution to this stalemate, especially on the states. He's yet to go. Maybe he'll visit after Salva Kiir returns from South Africa. But Mr. Salva Kiir, you're going there to look at what and trade? What? What? If I keep telling you, the leadership of South Sudan has its priorities upside down. Now, this is what we're talking about. This is not the time for trade deals to even consider anything. No. Who will come to trade in South Sudan if it's not peaceful? Who will come to invest in a country that is not peaceful and stable? Mr. Salva Kiir, please. And Joseph Otto Manassi, you're saying Kiir created states by decrees. He can as well reduce the states by decrees based on the agreement he signed himself. The agreement signed based on 10 states. I don't see the reason of going to South Africa, wasting that huge money with huge delegates. I tell you. So now let's just look at some of this news I just read there, and we started with Kenya, and the national carrier has halted flights to China, of course, for very understandable, and a lot of airlines and countries have issued a travel alert to their citizens, and asking them not to go there. So it's understandable because right now we don't want it to turn out to be like the other. Remember, is it the NASA? The fever that they had also a couple of years ago that the government of China refused to make public until it became very serious. Is it the Lassa or the Warsa? Please help me out. Google something. Let me know what that fever was. So this time they came out, and this coronavirus has become very serious, and it has claimed a life of over 100 people. And over a good number have been affected. So right now, China is on a lockdown in certain places. But one of our viewers here has told us it's very safe. Let me see his name. What is Chinedu? Chinedu is in China, and they say he's very safe, and we thank God for that. And everybody else is safe. So this is just a precautionary measure. And because China was going to celebrate its Lunar Year this coming weekend, and so this is a huge celebration where Chinese across the world travel back to China, and it's usually the best time where they attract a lot of tourists who go there and enjoy in these festivities. So this has coincided with a very important time in the calendar of Chinese, and it's really really not. It's not good for the economy of that country and just for the people generally. Imagine if you're a Christian and you're not able to travel during Christmas time, because this is the time you find some times off work, go meet with friends and family and just have a good time, and cannot happen. So people in China now are finding themselves in very difficult position, especially being that this coincides with the new year, the lunar year that they're going to celebrate over on Saturday. That is tomorrow, I believe. But now those plans have been thwarted, and so it's not telling how that will end. So they'll miss out, and maybe next year it will be better. You can double the celebrations, all right? Because right now, I think the safety of people in China and the world is more important. All right, good. So now, the national carrier Kenya Airways has halted its flights, and it's understandable. We go to Libya. I don't know. After Angela Merkel held this meeting to resolve the Libya crisis in Germany nearly 2 weeks ago, and of course the players there came out and they agreed to all honor the arms embargo and to honor the ceasefire. But we've seen different, because yesterday France, if you're watching the news here, France came out to accuse Turkey of bringing in mercenaries, to Libya, and so they were worried, and they were accusing Turkey of not honoring that agreement that they had. But now, 3 African presidents were in Brazzaville, that is the capital of the Republic of Congo, on Thursday. All right, when the 8th meeting of the African Union High-Level Committee in Libya was held. So they were looking at Libya and how to solve this matter in Libya. And this high-level committee also met last year. I don't know what were some of the findings. I don't know what were some of the resolutions. I don't know what was the way forward. I don't know what was the point of action, because they did not share with us. That was nearly a year ago. They met about the same matter. And guess what? Nothing changed. Nothing changed in Libya at all. If anything, the war intensified. Matter of fact, when the United Nations Secretary General went to visit Libya last year in April, there were some attacks that happened while he was in Libya that were caused by Khalifa Haftar and his people. So now host president Denis Sassou Nguesso was joined by his Djibouti counterpart, Mauritania counterpart, and so there were 3 of them. And now the AU chief Moussa Faki Mahamat was also in attendance. This is the same Moussa Faki who was just a participant in that conference that happened over Libya in Berlin, Germany. That was on Libya, and you wonder, a whole chairperson of African Union, you are going to participate in a talks that involves an African country, and you are a participant. You are supposed to be the convener of that meeting. That is how I felt as an Africa who believes African Union should be working for us. You cannot be involved. You cannot be invited to just be a participant, and then someone else is taking reins and is convening something that you're the person who's supposed to be doing it. African Union is supposed to be the body that is spearheading the talks, the mediation, the peace process in Libya, the peace process in South Sudan, the peace process in Sudan, the peace process, find solution in Amazonia, find solutions in Biafra, criticize what is happening in South Africa. I hear there's still some undertones of xenophobia there, because we see in Cape Town some residents are protesting over some refugees who are still being held up in a church, and they're saying these people needs to go. So African Union should be the body that really highlights these matters and try to find solutions and what's really going on. But that has not been the case. So I was very hesitant when, after that meeting in Berlin, and they said, so now we hand it over to African Union. I said, no, perhaps you should just continue with these talks, because African Union have been having these meetings over and over and over, these high-level committee meetings over and over about Libya, and they just nothing has been resolved so far. African Union has not found a solution to this. And of course, the matter of Libya is very, very complicated in different levels because of the many players that are involved, international players, especially from outside of Africa itself. So that has really complicated matters there. But still, African Union should have been in the front place to making sure that this problem has been solved. So now this meeting that happened between the Republic of Congo's president and Djibouti's president and Mauritania president, that was convened by Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed. He did not even convene this meeting. He was in attendance, and the AU chief said the summit had resolved to convene an inter-Libyan reconciliation conference in consultation with Libyan parties, neighboring countries, and the United Nations. And I saw neighboring countries were very not happy with that meeting that happened in Libya, in Berlin about 2 weeks ago to resolve this matter in Libya. So they were left out because they're key players. Guess where Libyans are running to because their home is not safe? They're running to other countries surrounding them. So other countries, the neighboring countries, were not very happy that they were left out of this talk. So now Musa Faki and the rest of the EU high-level committee, they will be convening this conference to try to consult and find ways. This is such a waste of time because I'll be back here with this news. And those resolutions, they met last year in April and they were passed. Nothing has been honored. Nothing has been implemented. And we shall be back here talking about the same thing, complaining about the same matter, and seeing how AU is incompetent. And I don't think this is fair for the people of Libya. I don't think this is fair for the people of Africa who pay and who service the AU. We pay it. It's not a body that just sits there. Member countries remit a certain amount of money that enables AU to run its affairs. So we have a right. We have a voice. We have a right to demand for them to show us what they're doing with this money. We have a right to demand for them to represent us better. So while they sit there and they earn their very nice salaries that we pay for, and they earn very wonderful allowance. Mr. Musa Faki right now is in the Republic of Congo. The guy will get a very good allowance, and the rest of the leaders and the people and the delegation that goes there with him through the money that we pay. So we have a voice. We have a right to demand. We have a right to ask. We have a right to question. We have a right to make queries, and we have a right to ask, why did they fire Ambassador Arika? I remember during the beginning of the first link, and that tape we keep playing when she's questioning how the Western world is still really and the double standards that they use when they're judging Africa, and they're engaging with us in trade and things like that. And people like France left, after colonizing Africa, but they really did not leave. When you look at the pact that France signed with the countries that it colonized, really, those countries are still under the colonialism. They're still bonded with France, even if they're trying to start their own currency and stop calling it franc, and now it will be adopted to ECO, and we saw now other countries there in West Africa don't want this new currency. I don't know. So anyway, UN is running imposts on EU and UK. Graham Susu, thank you so much, and thank you so much. You've been very thank you so much for your thoughts, and thank you so much for engaging with me this afternoon. Nearly 12:30, about 25 minutes past midday here. And Remy Jas, if you're in Yebura, you're saying, thanks so much, my sister. Thank you so much. And thank you so much. And we appreciate your support. Keep watching and keep sharing. Keep sharing that link of Punchline Africa, IPOB, One Family and Biafra. All right. So anyway, I read there earlier, we have some news from Biafra. But let me just read something here from Brighto Eka. Thank you so much also. I appreciate your participation. You're saying those leaders really know their duty. No. They spend taxpayers' money in Africa for nothing. In their interest is at stake. That very Africa chair has to be dismissed. Africa representative in the US because she criticized France. Yes, she did. With no reason at all. Ambassador Arikan was dismissed last year in October because, she spoke truth to power, and she criticized the United States, she criticized France, she criticized all these countries, China, whatever, name it, who are now coming back to Africa and are really looting. And guess who the gatekeepers are? Our leaders. Guess who are the greater gatekeepers are? The African Union. So you have to speak. Ishmael at J, you're saying, I think African Union is not willing to have a solution. They can if they want. Some of the leaders are acting as if they care. Had it not been the Berlin Diplomatic Conference, would the AU decide to act as if they Exactly, and that is the problem. So now they're running to convene that high-level committee meeting, and this is they had a high-level committee meeting last year, and that is why I'm very skeptical. When I heard that Madam Angela Merkel was now turning this to African Union to take care of, I just felt, you know what, this is hopeless already, because we've seen the track record of AU and how their conflict resolution, it's very lacking, is not felt here in Africa. Just point me one thing that they were able to get a solution to a conflict in this continent, that they actively participated without UN, without EU, without these other international bodies. They actually were able to find a solution. I can't think of one. And if they are, I don't know, maybe they mention it. Mention. I don't think, because African Union is just, I call them the gatekeepers. They act on masters, instructions, and a lot of people there, especially from the Western world, are the ones who are pulling strings here. So we think we have a body that is meant to represent Africa and its interests. We're being duped. We should start, asking for our money back. We pay, like you said, we pay for the taxes. We pay. We contribute. Our countries contribute, and when our countries contribute, they're contributing our taxes. So we have a right to demand. We have a right to speak on it. So let's keep talking. Thank you very much. If I should even steal words from Dr. David, they lack the insight of Africa politics and international diplomacy. Brighter Eka, yes, indeed. And, a doctor is not here with us, but I think we shall be having another show at 3 p.m. Where we shall look at something. So he shall be there. But right now he had some things that were important that he had to look at. So now we've been talking about of course, that meeting that African Union has convened over Libya. I don't know. They just sit and talk, and let's just see if that at all will bear fruits at this time round. Very concerning reports there from Mozambique, where now militia is really taking over, and they attacked a college the other day. We saw them attack people towards last year's election that Mozambique had. Was it in October? Yes. And so, they're also called as Al-Shabaab, but they're not known to be related to this Al-Shabaab that is a menace here in Kenya and in Somalia. That, is from Somalia and has become a menace here in Kenya. But the government is really working, and security agents in this country. I really must commend our security agents. And, we have a problem. Sometimes they do a not very good job. But I like the way the security agency in this country and the intelligence, in this country has really improved in how they are beefing up security for Kenyans, because even after those attacks, what would have happened? But we've seen them thwart other planning of other very deadly attacks. And I really must thank our security officers in Kenya and our intelligence community. You're doing a good job, but, keep being on the lookout, because now in Mozambique, another Al-Shabaab has mushroomed and is really terrorizing residents there. And since 2017, it has killed over 300 people there in Mozambique. So something else also is very worrying and troubling from Burundi. Remember, there are some journalists last year who went. There was some deaths that are happening there, and some militia were causing some deaths in certain parts of Burundi. So these journalists, they went there to capture. So when you are a true journalist and you go on to the field to do a story, you have to get both sides of the story. So this is what the government is saying. This is the state of security on the ground. You have to find the people who have been affected, who are fleeing the area, and get them to give the eyewitness account, like proper standard journalistic work. So they were found interviewing residents there in Burundi, some parts of Burundi where these skirmishes were happening. And the government said, no, you're breaching the national security. So now these journalists have been sentenced 2.5 years to jail. That happened yesterday. Of course, the lawyers have said they would appeal against yesterday's ruling. Now, this is my hopes, and I'm just happy that President Nkurunziza decided to step aside, because I know he would have remained in power, and those changes he made in the constitution really allowed him to go for another term and sit in that office until 2034, thereabout. But he decided to exit, which I think is a very smart move for him. I don't know if Burundians will forgive him for what happened after he changed the constitution. He had a constitutional coup to give himself another third term in 2015 that led to a lot of Burundians dying, and some of them now living as refugees in different African countries, a lot of them in Tanzania. I see a lot of them here in Nairobi and other parts of other countries in Africa. So now, what I hope to see in this new person, although I'm not very, I don't know, I just hope he becomes like what happened in Botswana. You remember what happened in Angola, or what happened where a president picks their own predecessor, but this predecessor turns out to be the opposite of that president. I'm just hoping that is what happens in Burundi, because they've picked the Secretary General of Mr. Pierre Nkurunziza's party. I can't remember the whole name. It's such a long name, the party, to be the president. And the elections are coming in May this year. So President Nkurunziza has stepped down. He was given a fairly good package, not exorbitant, which is okay, because other presidents would have asked for so much. So I'm happy that he's stepping aside. And this new person is coming in, except it's not a very new person, because this is a person who has worked and have enjoyed the politics of President Nkurunziza. So I don't know if we should expect for different, or he's just playing smart so that now he's been given the presidential candidacy. But I'm hoping after elections he can turn things around and become different, because things like this are ridiculous. A journalist cannot be jailed for doing their job. That is not okay. And we've seen President Nkurunziza closing all international media houses, BBC, Voice of Africa, what, nothing. So getting information from Burundi is very difficult, because President Nkurunziza, and his paranoia. Remember, he's not been able to leave Burundi for a very long time now, since 2015. Because of the attempted coup that happened in that country, and then the change of the constitution. And then and Burundi has not been very, even in the East African community, Burundi has been lagging behind in the manner in which it's participating, because even the president has not been able to be attending these meetings. So it's a lot. So I'm just hoping that this new president, should he be elected, or any other person who will be elected, the people of Burundi will have to say, I'm just hoping that he will turn things around 180 degrees complete and go the opposite of Pierre Nkurunziza, and make sure that Burundi becomes the country that it can be. And let's encourage freedoms. Like freedom of speech is very important in a country. For a country to develop, we must allow people to speak, and our governments must allow us to criticize them. Because at the end of the day, they're working for us. And if something is wrong, we should have the space to say, here, Mr. President, we do not agree. And not be scared of going to jail, or not be scared of being kidnapped or being murdered. We should be able to do that in a mature democracy. Well, mature democracy is a very far-fetched word in Africa. But I'm just saying, we should encourage that space. And so that has been lacking in Burundi. And so I'm just hoping that this new leadership will get rid of such things like this, because you cannot jail people for just doing their job. It is wrong. And we've seen that happening in Nigeria. And there's another news also I read in the morning. I did not capture it in one of the items that I had, the news items I had here, but also a journalist was jailed because of a similar thing of his reporting. I don't know if you can Google that story, if you can get his name, please share. So this is happening. It is really, this is something that is happening across Africa. And, let's just, speaking about Nigeria, let's just speak about Nigeria and still tie in the Biafra news item that I had this morning. So yesterday, if you did not join, so let me just recap to you what we were talking about. And there's a piece news item that quoted Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari as saying that he's really shocked by the state of insecurity of the country. He did not know it was that bad. So in other words, Mr. Buhari just woke up from a slumber. All these years, you people have been complaining about Boko Haram. He's been like, what? I mean, come on now. We've gotten rid of these guys. So he's been out of touch completely. So your cries, your what has been falling on deaf ears, because this guy has not been present. So now the other day he just woke up from sleep and was like, what? I didn't know. I'm shocked by resurgence of Boko Haram. I'm thinking, what do you mean resurgence? Boko Haram never went anywhere since he came to power. Matter of fact, they became more powerful. They increased in their might because you know what? The environment was very conducive for them to grow. The environment has been very conducive for them to multiply. The environment has been very conducive for them to recruit more desperate young Nigerians there to join Boko Haram. So Mr. President Buhari has not been aware of this. So he's saying, oh, he's shocked. He's shocked by the resurgence of Boko Haram, and I'm thinking, come on now, the Boko Haram has been causing mayhem. I'm here in Nairobi, very far from Nigeria, but I'm aware of what is happening in Nigeria. And Mr. President there is not even aware, is out of touch. He does not even know what is happening in his own country. So now, the lawmakers, after they convened a parliamentary meeting, after they came back after 5-week recess, and I don't know why any lawmakers in a country will take a recess for 5 long weeks while the state of security in a country is wanting as it is in Nigeria. I don't know why this is not a matter of urgency to them. Why do you take can you not even convene an emergency parliamentary session to just discuss the state of security in a country? So they were back after 5 weeks of a break, and on Tuesday. Was it on Tuesday or Wednesday? And they were also expressing how they are shocked by the insecurity in the country and expressing their concern. So now, yesterday, the lawmakers in Nigeria Law Chamber of Parliament called on the top brass of the army to resign, a failure to which the president should relieve them of their post. And I'm thinking, maybe the president should resign. If you cannot guarantee your people security in a country as a head of state, you have failed your people. You have failed to make sure that the borders are safe, that your people are safe within the borders of that country, the confines of that country. Then you have failed miserably. If you cannot give your people the security that they deserve, Mr. President. So the lawmakers in Nigeria are saying that the top brass army should resign. And if they don't resign, then President Buhari should, relieve them of their post, should fire them. So members of the House of Representatives on Wednesday, agreed at their plenary sitting to make the demand after debating over rising insecurity across the country. And meanwhile, Buhari called a national security meeting yesterday to discuss the security situation in Africa's most populous nation. So he called a meeting with these people who are top brass security agents in that country, who have failed to make sure to contain the security in that country. Why are you having this meeting with these people, Mr. President, who have failed to do their responsibility, who have failed to ensure Nigerians are safe? Why? So he had this meeting. Of course, the details have not been made public yet. At least by the time I was coming here, I was not able to really know what really was said in this meeting. But he held that meeting, with the top brass security, in Nigeria. Brighton Echo is saying absentee landlords. I remember during his first term, he promised to crush Boko Haram. President Jonathan was doing great than Buhari. Brighton, and his spokesperson for media and I don't know, social media or something, came out over the weekend and said, you know what? During President Buhari's reign, after he came in fact, Boko Haram has been curtailed. Boko Haram has not really spread. So, a matter of fact, I'll just quote his words. He said, now the northeast part of the country is like heaven. And during President Jonathan Goodluck, that place was like hell. Those were his words from that interview because I watched part of it. And I said, what? Okay, so they're saying now it's very heavenly. But when Jonathan Goodluck was there, it was very hellish. You could not go to Northeast. And I'm sitting here looking at the news we look at every day and how Boko Haram has really running its mark in parts of Nigeria. And I'm like, no wonder there's an increase in security. No wonder people continue to die. No wonder nobody cares about who their Biafrans and what they want and what they're looking for and their aspirations and why they're even calling for a referendum. Because they don't care. And the reason why they don't care is because they are out of tune with what is happening. They don't know, they don't understand. And Joseph, also you're saying it's true, Miriam. If you're sleeping, anything can happen around you without you knowing. I cannot blame Buhari. He was sleeping indeed. He's been asleep and he just woke up and he thought, oh my goodness, so there is an insurgent. I'm thinking, no, there hasn't been an insurgent. Boko Haram has been reigning terror here for the longest time we can remember, after President Buhari was in power and just before then, and after he became to power, they became even more notorious. All right, so let's look at what. So there's that news I read there of course, there's some news from from Biafra. Let's just finish this and tie it with the Nigerian news. And now the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, has denied striking a deal with President Muhammadu Buhari-led federal government. And Kanu said he will never collect a bribe from the federal government, especially now that his parents are dead. The IPOB leader was accused of striking a deal and collecting money from the federal government ahead of the burial of his parents. Now, Kanu parents, Mr. Israel Oku Kanu and his wife, Ogwoze Sali Neme Kanu, will be buried on Friday, February 14th. So listen. So there are accusations, and I don't know, do you think that this was coming from some government agents, that Mr. Nnamdi Kanu has struck a deal with the government and is being paid, I don't know for what, so that the government could allow him to come to Nigeria and bury his parents? I don't know why these allegations have been found, but Mr. Kanu has come out and said, no. I cannot. That cannot be the case, because these are the same people who, participated, who caused even the death of his parents. Mr. Kanu has been saying that, and he has been very, very vocal, and his criticism against President Buhari has not stopped. So when I was reading this news, I thought, who could be this person? Do you think this had anything to do with the government? Propaganda or something like that, because Mr. Buhari has come out and refuted these claims, and he has said that there's no way he can collect any bribe from a Nigerian government, especially now that his parents are dead. And of course, I don't know where this information came from, but of course, there has been the accusations that Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, had struck a deal with the President Buhari led federal government, and Kanu said he will never collect. He termed that as a bribe, and he said that is something he will never do, especially he will never strike a deal with the government, collect money from the federal government of Nigeria ahead of his parents' burial. And he said he can't do that, especially now that his parents are dead. So I don't know what you think. Who could have been, who could have been the reason behind this story? Who could have planted this story? I don't know. Have you heard about it? What is really happening? Let's see. I saw something there. Bol Nyang, good morning to you. You're watching from Australia. I hope you're not affected by that inferno. I see now it's being contained to some greater extent. I hope that you are safe, and I hope that you started off this new year very well. Are we still wishing each other a new year? I think it's a bit late right now, but I hope that your 2020 started out right. So thank you so much. You're watching us from Australia. And Dominic Nwando, you're saying one of the senators said Buhari should resign. That's what I thought. And Ishmael Adjay, thank you so much. You're saying, and it's interesting to hear that from the Nigerian president. Boko Haram issue is a global concern. Almost everyone is aware. I don't know the entire base upon he made such unfortunate statement, though I don't think he should wake up. Nigeria security is African concern because sections of Boko Haram is affecting other African states. President Buhari, please invest in Nigerian intelligence. Innocent people are suffering. Please wake up. Please, in fact, we should start a hashtag. Please, Buhari, wake up. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wake up and just do something. Wake up and just make sure your people are safe. Just wake up, Mr. President. But he seems to have been woke now. And he's been baffled. In fact, that is the word he used. That he is baffled by insurgents of Boko Haram in the country. Because this a few days ago, Sometimes back last year, he also responded to the criticism that he's been receiving, that people are saying that his government has been, Boko Haram has thrived under his leadership. And he's been saying, no, Boko Haram has been technically been defeated. So in his mind, while he went to sleep, Mr. Buhari thought, we have technically defeated Boko Haram. So I don't know that technicality. It does not even apply here, because Boko Haram Boko Haram is causing mayhem. Boko Haram caused killings in Mali, as I read there earlier. Boko Haram caused some killings yesterday in Burkina Faso. Boko Haram killed Nigerians the other day. Came here with the news. Even yesterday I had a certain news on that. Boko Haram has been killing people in Niger. Boko Haram is notoriously killing innocent lives across Africa. And as you rightfully mentioned there, Ishmael Ajay, you pointed out, it is just not a Nigerian problem. This now is catching up with the rest of Africa. And that's why we have to continue talking, whether we live in Nigeria or not, whether we're neighboring Nigeria or not, because this is becoming out of hand. So it's just now that he's meeting with those top security officials that really have failed on their job. Why is he even meeting with these people? He should have fired them. He should have perhaps fired them and maybe gotten new people there and see if they will make a difference in improving the security of Nigeria. But, that's just my thought. But, of course, that is not something that we are looking to see there happening. So we just look at some news shortly about Amazonia, and the leader of the Now movement, Mr. Akeremuna, has paid a visit to Mancho and other Anglophone detained at the Kondogoi Central Prison in connection to the crisis in Amazonia. Although nothing came out of the meeting, I think he went there on Tuesday to the Kondogoi prison. Sources within his camp say he discussed on ways of defending some of the detainees who are yet to be judged. Imagine being in prison for 2, 3, 4 years. You've never been taken to court. Nobody has ever found you guilty of anything, but you're in prison. That is such an injustice that is happening in Cameroon and to the people of Amazonia, because they're taken to those prisons over there. And so, you remember last year, there were like 2 protests that broke out in different, one in Kondogoi prison and another one over the same matter, because they're protesting. They're saying, okay, fine, you're holding us here. Can you at least try us? Can you at least take us through, a judicial process so that we are determined whether we are guilty or we are not, so that when we are serving here, then we know, whether we are guilty, so it's fair like that. But these people have been in prison, not even being detained in a police cell. They are in prison for the longest time, and they have not been allowed the due process of the law. And that is what advised the protest that we saw last year that happened in 2 different, prisons there in Cameroon, and the situation is terrible. You can imagine even the kind of conditions they are being subjected in when they go to the prisons over there. So it's very saddening. So this leader of the Now movement has come out and said he's willing to try to find a solution and to represent some of the detainees who are yet to be judged from the Anglophone region. And the detainees also made proposals to him when he visited them. They made proposals to Mr. Akeremuna. He is the leader of Now movement. So they made some proposals to him to take to the African Forum, which will be held here in Nairobi sometimes in April this year. And so I'm just waiting to see, because they'll be discussing the Cameroon Anglophone crisis. So but I need to find my way into this forum so that I can find some people there to interview over this matter, and I'm sure that we will do that. We shall do that. I believe we can do that. So I'll talk to Dr. Matsanga and see if we can talk to these people over there. And Brighto, you're saying, why is he coming now, Miriam? And is he what? I don't know. That is not a complete word. That is the art in political motivated. Who? Mr. Who? Oh, this guy. Oh, Akeremuna. So you don't think it's going to be a solution? You don't agree? Why is he coming now? Who is he, by the way? Now movement. Is it in support of Anglophone and referendum and a secession? What does he stand for? Or maybe he's a spy. Who knows? So now these people, but the detainees gave him some proposals. You think he'll take them to Paul Biya or to this? What? Okay, now I'm just having my own theories in my head, and My mind is becoming very creative. You don't trust him? No? Okay. Joseph Otto, you're saying, thank God Africa is not yet affected with the outbreak of coronavirus. Let's pray for continuous God's protection. At the same time, maybe Nyamachoma from bushmeat can help. From bushmeat? Because they're saying and you're laughing there. Otto, we don't want to be dead. Let's just coronavirus pass and then we can go back to eating Nyamachoma. But that hasn't stopped anybody from, especially here, eating meat because we love it so much. Also, Brighto Eka, you're saying he is an agent of Paul Biya. Ah, okay. Zudita Zhang, you're saying Akere is two-sided person. All right. Okay, but now this don't you think these detainees knew that? Why did they give him these proposals to bring to Nairobi on their behalf? So you think he'll pass by Paul Biya and then tell him this is what these people are saying? Okay, now that's not very nice. That is not very nice there. All right, so we are almost done, but I cannot finish before talking about South Sudan. You know, we are counting now 22 days to go to the peace deal there in South Sudan. Brighter, you're saying he stays in Yaoundé and it takes him 4 years to visit his people. Okay, so he's an Anglophone, but he's a sellout. He's what Americans would call Uncle Tommy. All right, okay. Or what used to be called a house Negro, you know, a long time ago there in America. All right, okay. So let's talk about South Sudan. And by the way, Kenya are the second most fluent English speakers in Africa, according to a ranking by, it's not important news, but you know, by Global Private Language Tutor Education First, a ranking which primes the country to attract foreign investors. So anyway, we were colonized by the British. So, okay, and all our schools were taught in English. So sometimes I wonder why we even have to take this language proficiency, because all our exams we do in English. Everything is done in English. You know, Kiswahili is just in school. That is our national language. We just do it in school. You pass the exams, but when you go to any interview, when you go anywhere, almost everything is filled with English. You know, so I'm not surprised. Okay. So South Sudan's President Salva Kiir on Thursday left for South Africa for a 3-day official visit following an invitation from President Cyril Ramaphosa. His office has said. Kiir's spokesperson Ateni Wek Ateni said the president was accompanied by 2 ministers and the managing director of state-owned oil firm. Why are we talking about oil? Why is the state-owned farm managing director part of the dignitaries, or not the dignitaries, the president's entourage for the diplomatic, and they went there for diplomatic and trade talks? Mr. Salva Kiir, why are we talking about oil right now? Why are we looking at trade as talks as what is important for the people of South Sudan? Please help me understand. Why? There's just 22 days to go. This is not what I want to sit here and read. And remember, I was complaining about the same last year towards the deadline of 12th November that flopped so badly. You know, the things that they were doing, I was like, why are they even talking about this right now? This is not what I want to come here and read. I want to see President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, who's meant to be traveling to Juba very soon. I think after Salva Kiir comes back from South Africa, I want to see them tell us what is happening. I want to see them, let us know the latest, how they're progressing. I want to hear. We don't want to hear 1 week to go or 2 weeks to go, and then they start issues like we've been seeing happening, and there's been some beats and trickling of that matter because they agree on one thing and then they change. The next day they're speaking a different language. Like together they had agreed that the matter of the states will be forwarded to arbitration and will be looked at by IGAD. Then later on, Riek Machar's camp came out and said, no, I don't think so, because we don't trust that will happen. So we need it resolved now. And it has proved the matter that cannot be resolved now. That requires more time, That requires when people are together and when people are calm, where people do not come there with preconditions or, very hardlining conditions, when people are not under pressure like they are right now to form the unity government. That is something that should be held when people are just calm and for the greater good of South Sudan. So now the president has headed to South Africa for a 3-day official visit. I don't know what you're going to do in South Africa for a 3-day official visit. Why are you going to speak to President Ramaphosa when he refused, no, not him, but the other side? It is South Africa's vice president who was mediating the latest peace talks and who was trying to arbitrate between and trying to just find a solution to the state's matter that has refused to be resolved. Well, has not refused to be resolved, but the leaders have refused to solve it. So I don't know why President Salva Kiir is traveling to South Africa. So, Emmanuel Malual, you're saying South Africa is after oil in South Sudan. That is why he traveled with this general manager for state oil. Because why are you... But is this the time to travel with such people? Why are you going to have trade talks anyway? That is not what should be happening, Mr. Salva Kiir. What happened to priorities in this country of South Sudan? What happened to the leaders of this country in South Sudan? I don't understand at all. At all. I'm just perplexed, by what is happening there. I don't know. He's going there for 3 days. So let's count. So he shall be back when on Monday. He went yesterday, then Friday, then Saturday. So perhaps he'll be back on Sunday. He better come and tell us what's really happening. I want to know the progress of the peace process. I want to see Mr. Riek Machar fly to Juba, have a meeting. I want them to tell us what's really happening. We don't want those last minute, excuses and excuses upon excuses. And ask after what U.S. Ambassador, Secretary for African Affairs, Assistant Secretary for African Affairs said yesterday that international players are tired, international players are fed up, and they've had enough of doing to Sudan what the government is supposed to be doing to its own people. We don't mind helping, we don't mind coming in, but under the best conditions. And right now, the leadership of South Sudan there is not making it any easier for anybody who really wants to help South Sudan. So come on now, you have to get your act together. And so Guinea-Bissau there, President Alpha Conde is really trying to play with the minds of Guineans there. So he's saying that he is going to amend the constitution to meet the needs of today's world in defense of a controversial proposed constitutional amendment expected to be debated by lawmakers. President Alpha Conde's term is meant to get over. It's supposed to finish this year, serving Guinea, but he's refusing to go. He's refusing to go, and there have been protests calling on him to retire and just go. He has served. He came out and said, no. According to Article 51 of the Constitution of Guinea, actually the president can amend the Constitution for whatever reason. So he's very adamant. I don't know if he really cares about the peace and stability of Guinea. If already people are telling you to stop, perhaps our leaders should learn to listen to what their people want. So there you go. All right. So thank you so much. It is 1 p.m. here, exactly 1 p.m. here in Nairobi. And that is where we end our today's edition of Good Morning Africa. But before I do that, let me perhaps read some of your comments. You're saying, Miriam, that is Joseph Otto Manasseh. You're saying, Miriam, I don't expect peace in South Sudan. Oh. Okay, but if until now they are wandering from country to country for other people to advise them, how can it work in 22 days? If they cannot agree on a number of states, then Kiir can reduce the number of states by the same decrees he created within the 32 states. Even his minister of why are you calling him the minister of misinformation? You mean Michael somebody? Luel or somebody, Michael. So you're calling him his Minister of Information. You're calling him Minister of Misinformation. It's confusing us. That's very funny. Emmanuel Malual, you're saying, Miriam, there are high chances of possible extension. It is time for international community. No, No, and no. I don't know. Any more extension in South Sudan is just gonna make me pull off my hair. That's not gonna be fair, because it's not fair for the people of South Sudan who are longing for a stable country. People out there, you guys are out there. I'm sure you're waiting for a day where you can come home and invest home and have a good time and be proud that I'm going home. They owe it to the people of South Sudan. No, they cannot be allowed any more time. And I think the US has been very adamant about that. And Ara Betha in Congo, you're saying, nice watching Punchline TV. Hey, nice see you. I normally see you on our YouTube channel, but thank you for joining and thank you for watching. Ishmael Ajay, you're saying, my sister, most of our leaders don't think about the ordinary people instead of the peace and security issue in South Sudan. He's going to talk about trade. Yes. Without peace, trade would make sense. Without peace, trade would not make any sense. My point exactly. Who would want to come to invest in a war-ridden country, in a country that is not stable, in a country that has not proper structure, in a country that is the second most corrupt country in the world? And that is because of how it is today, what the war has done to that country. There are no proper structures for checks and balances. So corruption has become rampant. The fact that it's not even commented on that Transparency International report findings really baffles me. Let me use the word baffling, the way Mr. Buhari said, the insurgents of Boko Haram has baffled him. This really baffles me, that this is not even a concern for President Salva Kiir. It's baffling, to say the least. Thank you so much. This has been the Friday edition of Good Morning Africa. I hope to see you here on Sunday for Africa Showdown, but maybe, I'm not sure, maybe we'll have an afternoon show, I'm not sure, because Dr. Matanga is busy with some things. I don't know if he'll make it on time for the editors, not later at in the afternoon, but if he does, then I shall be back here. If not, then I'll see you on Sunday for another edition of Africa Showdown. It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Ogebe Omod. Thank you so much, Emmanuel Malual. Thank you so much, Ishmael Jay. Thank you so much, Arabetha. Thank you, all of you, Joseph, Brighto, Eka. Thank you, really appreciate. Judith Zhang. All of you, you're so much. I can't even name all these names, but thank you so much for engaging with me, and thank you for your time. I'll see you later. My name is Miriam Agutu, and it is bye-bye for now.